tonight, this is a very interesting subject that we're going to talk about healing the spirit. And I want to start it with one of my favorite poems. The subject tonight is love, and for tomorrow night as well. As a matter of fact, I know of no better subject to discuss until we all die. And, you know, discussing healing is really just that, discussing love. How can we manifest love through our bodies? How can we be love in this world? How can we address whatever ails us through the power of love? And love has so many different directions and misunderstandings also in our world. And you know, when we talk about healing, there's something that Ram Dass said that always touches me because it rings so incredibly true, so painfully incredibly true. Healing does not mean to go back to the way things were before, but rather allowing what is now to move us closer to God. And when we really look at that, that's very humbling, because that is the principles of thy will be done. My will is here, but my will is to manifest thy will. And if thy will means challenges, then that's where I get to move through. And I believe this is one of the hardest things for us as human beings to really look at and to embrace, and to allow that to move into ourselves and to work with that. Working with that not by giving up and becoming angry and becoming frustrated, which of course all of these little things are part of the way, but rather to see how through all these different challenges can we move in love. And you know, there's so many maps that we're given when we talk about healing. And sometimes it's a little hard to know exactly where to begin. So I was thinking about 3 different ways in which we are going to look at this whole subject of healing tonight. When we begin to read the human body, you know, sometimes I work with a patient and they say, well, how do you see this? How do you know something like that? And it's not that I'm so incredibly special and insightful. I mean, I'm sometimes that too. But I think the most important thing is I have learned a map. And the map that comes from many, many ancient traditions is so incredibly insightful that when we begin to understand that map and when we begin to understand ourselves within the context of this map, then we really see our own path out of disease into wholeness and into enlightenment. As human beings, you know, we see ourselves as this body. And it's interesting, in Japanese acupuncture, the basic principle of acupuncture, the basic understanding of how they needle and how the needle is used in acupuncture is that understanding this disease is not so much in the body, but it is in the disconnection of the body to the pranic body that is all around us. You know, it's been very interesting because in the ancient cultures, they've talked about these 7 layers, 7 energetic layers. 5 bodies, 7 layers. Different cultures have slightly different ways, but in the end, if you compare the different names that they give their different layers, it all comes about to the same thing. And so we first have this body. And around this body is this emotional body. Do you know that sometimes, I'm sure you all know this feeling that sometimes you walk down the street or something and there is this undescribable feeling of either joy or complete unease, and you don't really know where it is. And it didn't start in the body. It started, you can really feel it more like around you, and then when it touches you, then you can maybe put a word to it. And it is that layer, that energetic layer, that is one of the first layers that when it gets injured, we feel it inside. True, they say, the ancients say, and I've seen that in the practice over and over again, is that injury happens very much from the outside in, from the outer bodies moving inward. So we have the body, the physical body, we have the emotional body, we have what's called the lower mental body, we have the astral body. And that astral body, that fourth body, that's something where I want to kind of linger just a little bit, because that step from 3 to 4, from that mental body to that next step, which is what we call the astral body, is something that actually Gurdjieff talked about many years ago. And I don't know if you know who Gurdjieff is. Yeah, Gurdjieff was a mystic in the 1920s. He was a Russian mystic, very amazing man who later took his disciples and immigrated and went to Paris. And if you ever want to read any of his incredibly difficult to read but very insightful pieces, one of I think the most famous probably is Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. And it's quite a philosophical work, and it is really a key work to esoteric architecture. And so anyway, but what's interesting about this astral body is that it is seen in all of the cultures as, in this particular body, that's where we have our veil. Even if we begin to penetrate, even if we are closer to our emotional body, even if we're in touch with our emotional body, if we're in touch with our mental body, if we are that bright and enlightened, when it comes to that next level, that's where, for many of us, there is this complete disconnect. And I'm mentioning this because as we move forward, you will see how that gets reflected in other ways. So the next body after that is called the higher mental body, then the cosmic body, then the Buddhic body. All of these, they go very, 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 very far out and are on some level, yes, also are energetic bodies, but for most of us, pretty inaccessible. On a conscious level. Doesn't mean that on a subconscious level we are connecting with them and that we are reaching out with them and that we are attracting people and pushing people away and attracting situations and pushing situations away all the time. So one of the ways that I like to look at the human body is actually 3 different systems that are very parallel, and I want to just talk a little bit about them. You've all heard about the chakras, yeah? The 7 chakras, yes? Some of you might also be familiar with the Hebrew tree of life, the 10 sephirots, yes? The 10 different principles of growth, which are actually 7 principles of growth, because some of them have 2 aspects to the same coin. So again, mirroring the 7 major chakras. And then in the Catholic Christian tradition, we have the 7 sacraments. And if we look at all of those together, we will see how incredibly parallel they are. and how much of a map they are to our own self-understanding. Because all these archetypical meanings in these particular systems are basically identical. You know, they are rooted in different traditions, but their meaning is identical. And when we understand the wisdom of these systems, and again, our relationship to those different systems and how we fit into them, that really can provide us with a roadmap to our own healing. And you know, when it comes to healing, truly there isn't really anybody that can do it for us other than yours truly. You know, it is how we individually show up in our life that becomes the healer. In our own right, we are all wounded healers. And when we allow ourselves to surrender to that wisdom, it's like another chapter can open. So when we look at these chakra system, then the chakra system teaches us that each chakra holds records of all the events that have taken place in a person's life. Now, in my case, that's a lot. To sift through that is unbelievable. I wouldn't even know where to start, right? And if I look at myself and imagine that every single one of those imprints that are inside of me, they all hold a lesson. And the question always, of course, is, am I learning my lesson? Have I learned my lesson? Am I learning my lesson? Because they keep repeating itself. You know, whatever it is that we have to learn, it keeps coming up right in front of us, which is sometimes really infuriating. Yeah, can you relate? Yes, okay, good. The interesting thing is also that when the energy, when an energy center becomes injured, it will influence the entire body. You know, we're all connected through lines, through spirals, through you know, in the yoga system, we have all these different nadis. You know, they don't even know exactly how many, like 72,000. Some people only say 60,000, but honestly, between 60,000 and 72,000, it really doesn't matter anymore, right? Because if I imagine that all these different energy centers inside of the body I have, that can hold energy, that can open energy, that can be ecstatic or that can be closed, that's nearly overwhelming. But the interesting thing about the chakra system to me is always that when we look at the chakras in this linear way that most of the time we see in whatever you know, prints or pictures that we see and that we are being taught, usually we can actually also impose that and superimpose that onto that spatial arrangement that I just talked about with the layers of energy. You know, in those layers of energy, this really isn't something that is just, I don't know, some esoteric mumbo jumbo. Because interestingly enough, there has been quite a lot of research that has been done that shows, and I think it was about 15 years ago, maybe only 10 years ago, that actually the researchers in Harvard found out and proved that indeed there are measurable 7 layers of energy around the body, which I think is pretty fantastic. That some people way thousands of years ago had already said that. And now we go, yes, we can measure it, yay, we know it's true. So I always love that. I always love when science proves something that you know, the ancients have felt, have you know, been in touch with already, you know. It's so beautiful because it's so incredibly poetic how these two systems could really support one another. So if we start with the chakras, the first chakra, Muladhara. It's the first chakra, it's the base of the spine. The principle with that chakra is all is one. We are all connected. In our own way, if we like one another or not, we are all connected. So the first thing that we get to respect, that we are being invited to respect, is our family, our community, and all the human relations that are out there. And if we look out into the world, we can see that many people already miss right there. Right? Otherwise, the news would be very different than they are. But after many thousands of years, we still haven't learned that very basic Muladhara lesson. And, you know, in the Catholic system or in the Christian system, this would be associated or paralleled with the sacrament of baptism. You know, baptism is when you get accepted or being invited into the human community. That's when somebody says, yes, you have the blessing, you are part of our community. And in the tree of life, it is symbolized by Shekinah. And Shekinah means divine presence. That is the acknowledgement, the first acknowledgement of divine presence coming onto the planet. So my Muladhara, my first chakra, which is also my structure, my bones, the legs, the feet, the immune system, everything that says, yes, I am here, that is part of the Muladhara chakra. It is associated with our physical family, with the groups, with being able to be secure in a group setting. You know, sometimes we have physical family, but many times we also have a different kind of family, a different kind of tribe. I lived most of my life away from my physical family, but wherever I lived, I was part of a tribe. You know, you are part of my tribe. And, you know, I wish that my tribe could be the whole world, but honestly, I'm not that enlightened yet. There's a few people that I think really need to start behaving a little bit better, you know? So when our Muladhara chakra is strong, then we have the ability to provide for our life's necessities. We have the ability to stand up for ourselves. We have the ability to stand in our feet and say, yep, this is where I'm going, this is me, I'm good, let's move on. If there's injury, a lot of the times it can manifest with all different kinds of, you know, low back pain, of course, immunity challenges, even depression, parasites, hemorrhoids, you know, all these things that are associated with some of the organs of elimination, some bone issues. You know, a lot of the times, you know, when I say this, I'm always a little bit hesitant to say that because we in the West, we tend to look at everything so incredibly linear. You know, it's A, B, C, D. Well, it's not. There is really more than just this very straightforward path. I think life is both straight and round at the same time. And there is such incredible beauty in that. But it also is a lot of the times the base of our challenges because we want it to be one way or the other. And yet, if we look at it, we also see that it is part of our, you know, that's part of the duality that we need to unify. The next chakra, Svadhisthana. Svadhisthana in the lower belly is associated with honoring one another. Honoring one another because this chakra is all about relationship. And it's relationship to the outside. its relationship to our friends, its relationship to our boss, its relationship to our creativity, to our sexuality, to money, to all the big stuff, right? So is it any wonder that so many of us are stuck right there? Because how challenging is it to figure all these things out? I don't know about you, but I've been in love plenty times. And it's been a challenge every single time. It's never been easy. I've had my own struggles with finances, with any kind of relationships, with having a boss, with being the boss. Neither of them is easy, is comfortable, right? And this particular Svadhisthana, which is all about this, this creativity, this connection of bringing two things together, this reaching out and saying, ooh, I want to connect with you, whatever that you is, that holds so much richness for us. And, in the, and when we're not working, when it's not working out for us in that area, then on an emotional level, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of blame, there's a lot of, we throw these things at somebody else. It's not like, I'm not taking responsibility, it's that person that's doing that. And of course, I know none of you are doing that, but I know, I know for myself, many times I go, okay, it's so uncomfortable, because the moment you put the finger outside, of course, there's a few pointing right back. Yeah. So because of its location, it is associated with of course, the lower spine, our sexual organs, bladder, pelvis, and also all the diseases, the imbalances that go with that. It's interesting because many of you know that I'm an acupuncturist, and I've been doing alternative medicine, whatever alternative in that case really is, but I've been doing this kind of holistic medicine for about 37 years, and I find that everything that a person goes through in their life is somehow reflected in the body. It's sometimes scary and quite stunning to see how the body is this map for us to, like a book that we read and go, wow, this is what I am actually facing right now. And if we have the courage, and obviously all of you that are here are having a glimpse, at least, of that courage to step in there and say, what do I have to look at in myself? Is there anything that I can look at in myself in order to heal this, that, or the other? So in the Christian system, this particular sacrament is called communion, right? And communion, that's the time when you basically step out from the family's very safe place and you step out into the community. You're being accepted into the community. You go and reach a little bit further. That's when you start going to school and all these kinds of things. In the Jewish tradition, in the Hebrew tradition, the Sephirot associated with that is called Yesod. And Yesod means creative, sacred union. So sometimes, when I remember I learned about some of these principles many, many years ago, and when I would have, for instance, menstrual cramps, right, I would put my hands onto my second chakra right here, and I would associate that sacred union with myself and with anybody that I wanted to be in sacred union with. And that sacred union didn't necessarily mean sex, right? But it meant that sacred union. And I don't know if it really just helped because my hands were warm, or if it helped because of the visualization, but there was some shift that happened every single time. And it is the sum of those little shifts that over time make a difference, like a yoga practice. You know, one yoga practice, most likely you won't be able to put your leg behind the head the first time around. Most likely. After a few years, doing it and doing it and doing it, you might be able to, right? So, and it's just the same with these practices that we can practice within ourselves and for our bodies. Just a couple of times, probably isn't going to do it. Manipura, the third chakra. This is a very interesting one. This, you know, when we remember how we talked in the beginning about these 7 bodies and how we said the second body is like the emotional body. So this emotional body is what we were just referring to and has similarities to Svadhisthana, right? Because most of our emotions are coming out around relationships with all of these things that we had just talked about, right? Relationships with people, relationships with sex, relationships with money, relationship with our creativity, right? So many of our emotions are stuck right in there, yeah? So the next one, Manipura, very interesting. Manipura is right here, solar plexus. This is one of the places in our bodies that tends to be held the most. This is where we breathe. This is where our diaphragm is supposed to move up and down. Hopefully it does. If we practice yoga, we get a glimpse of what that might feel like. If we train, if we're athletes, we also feel what that feels like, because or if we're singers, then we have a little bit more of a connection with that. Other than that, this is an area where a lot of energy can get stuck. And this is the principle of this particular Manipura chakra is about honor yourself. Honor thyself. And you know, with all our wonderful, positive thinking, and I'm so wonderful, and I'm so great, and I'm so awesome, many of us have not really mastered that art of honoring ourselves. I once, many years ago, I had a great teacher of craniosacral therapy, and he was also a homeopath, and he was just this quite amazing healer. He never, even though he was from the West, he never really could survive in the West, so to speak. He loved India. And in India, the way he was as a healer, he never charged people. People would just give him. They would just provide for him and his family. And he had 4 kids, one more different looking than the others. It was like a family of hobbits. I've never seen such a unique family, truly. And this man was somewhat of a genius. And he lived wonderfully in India because people saw him, really saw him, and they would pilgrimage to him, and they would, you know, honor him. But anyway, see, one of those things where I get sidetracked. But he was, one of the things that he said, and I so loved that, is he said, you know, in the West, on the outside, we all go, I'm so wonderful, I'm so great, I'm so fantastic, I'm so cool, right? And inside we go, oh my God, I'm so insecure, I hope nobody sees it, ha ha, right? And in India, it's the other way around. In India, people go, oh, no, Papa, no, I'm so small, and inside they go, I'm Brahma, I'm Shiva, I'm Krishna, you know? So it's like opposition of cultures, you know? But where's the balance? Where is this honoring ourselves? this strength in the Manipura that has true self-esteem, true self-respect, a gut instinct, a personal code of honor that we truly live by. And here is the place where that inner duality comes together. Making something, creating something on the outside that makes sense. Here's where it comes together. And so this is where this is literally our seat of our self-confidence, of making responsible decisions, of making, of evaluating the criticism that comes our way. And that's something that we in the West also, I have to say, for many of us, it's very, very challenging. And different cultures have very different responses to criticism. You know, in Europe, it's much more like, whatever, you know? People can criticize you and, yeah, okay, you think so? Okay. Well, actually, I think so different. Okay, bye, see you, mwah, love you. Very different. Here, criticize, no criticism. No, that's not, right? Very, very few people are really willing to learn from that. And very few of us really know how to put criticism across in a way that is kind. Criticism isn't always bad, you know? It's not, it's one aspect of the human, of the human beingness, right? It's very different to have criticism that is such that it destroys somebody. That's not criticism, that's being mean, right? So our ability to give and receive critical thought from somebody else is associated with this particular chakra. So of course, as far as the body then is concerned, of course it has to do with the abdomen, it has to do with the liver, with the gallbladder, with the pancreas, with the spleen, with all these organs of digestion and metabolizing. And of course then also the dysfunctions of this particular chakra would be associated with things like, you know, diabetes and acid reflux and stomach ulcers and hepatitis and all these things that are associated with these particular organs. And again, when I say that, I'm bringing this up as a general association. Please do not take this completely linear. Yeah? Can we have that understanding? Thank you. So in the Catholic system, this particular step into society is the confirmation. Right? In confirmation, that is actually when you are given your own flag and you're being asked to now, you get to step out into the world and start to either create your own job, you know, because for many people that's when, in the old days at least, that's when they would start working, or you would go and decide on what kind of profession you were going to study for. So this is truly when you say, okay, this is now me. Now I'm going to be me. And this me, with the self-respect, with the self-evaluation, with the self-esteem, this is where I'm going into. In the tradition of the tree of life, we actually, interestingly enough, have two sephirots in this place. And the two sephirots is Nazé and Hod. Nazé means as much as endurance. And this is the endurance that supports us to reach our goals. And it is paired with Hod. And Hod is gratitude, to have the ability to reach our goals. So I find it very interesting that these two are coupled together at this place. That place of, okay, I can do it, and then gratitude and respect for myself, for what is given, so that I can move forward in the world. And remember how we talked about, when we talked about the 7 layers, how we talked about that between the 3rd and the 4th layer, that was the biggest challenge? Yes? Gurdjieff was saying this is, if you know the scales, ba, 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 it's at the ba, 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 ba. We have a full step, we have a full step, we have a full step, and we have a half step. And it's in this half step where the music, the inner harmony changes direction. And this changing of direction into the heart level, from the power level into the heart level, that is where the veil seems to come in. Very interesting, right? Because when we talk about those bodies that are going outside, that is the astral level. And that level is, in some traditions, also referred to as the veil. That's what we cannot pierce. And that is also where, as human beings, if you look at some of the work in sacred geometry that has come out in the last 20, 30 years, you will see that it is in this transition from the 3rd to the 4th space that where humanity, apparently this is where we are hovering right now as a collective consciousness. Now, there are people that have penetrated that. There is Buddha, there is Jesus, there is Mahavir, there are many people that have penetrated that. But as far as humanity is concerned, this is where we are hovering. And actually, if that's really where we're hovering, it's not so bad. But it's also very interesting because this plays from personal power to anahata, unconditional love. This is where we were talking about when we talk about healing. This is what we want to have access to in healing. Because this anahata is ruled by the principle of love is the divine power. So this is where the personal power moves up to the divine power. This is divine power for the body, for the mind, and for the spirit. This is where we hold all these strong emotions of love, but also hate. Where we hold compassion, forgiveness. And they say that the biggest poison that we carry as humans is to not be able to forgive somebody. And, I know from my own personal experience and from my own personal history, which there were places and times that were not very pretty, but I also know of some instances, particularly one, of course, that I'm thinking of right now, that where for years I was not able to forgive that person. And I have no clue what happened to that person. I really don't. Sometimes I wish I would, but I don't. But the biggest thing was, and sometimes I look back, and when I see people in that predicament, my heart goes out, because the poison that was created in my own life for me, the trauma that I created for myself, because I could not say, I forgive you. I could not say it, I could not mean it. I wanted revenge. And it's not pretty, but forgiveness, when I finally could soften enough, and it took years. I admitted it took years, very, very unenlightened. I lived the rest of my life really enlightened. But that one, that was a dark corner in my soul. And when that finally opened up, that was amazing. Something completely different within me was accessible. So, and I'm saying this because maybe some of you might have similar experiences. Maybe some of you know of other things where you can go, I could go there. I could check that out. And obviously because we're talking about heart, everything associated with heart, our heart issues, lung issues, shoulder issues, everything in this area would be associated with the heart chakra. Now, of course, in the Christian tradition, this is associated with the sacrament of marriage, right? Because marriage, that's when it hopefully goes into thy will be done, and I surrender to a love that is bigger than my personal. I surrender to a power that is bigger than my personal. In the Hebrew system, this is symbolized by Tiferet, and Tiferet means compassion, harmony, and beauty. So when we connect with our heart, that is truly, and when we live from our heart, that is truly, that gives us that living from compassion, from beauty, from harmony. And I can only pray that we all get there and do that sooner rather than later. Next one is Vishuddha. Vishuddha associated with the throat and with the throat chakra. And here again, we're taking it from the personal power into the personal will and surrendering the personal will to the divine will. So here, this is one of the very important places of healing, because here we are allowing choices to arrange struggle into success and our own wounds into strength. There is no question that in our life we will be wounded. Pain is part of this human experience, just like there's ecstasy. But I believe it is how we show up in this pain that brings the transformation. And sometimes, Mahavira at one point said something, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't know exactly, but he said something to the effect of, I am staying here on this planet with my people because I want to reach my hand out and let everybody understand what it's like to be connected to heaven. And a lot of people, if they were allowed, did that. When you're able to live in such a high place, to have the compassion to connect with everybody, that we all have glimpses of that, but we don't necessarily are able to live our lives from that. So it is some of these sages that have decided to do that and show us the way in that sense. And I think that's something that is very important for every one of us to really acknowledge, that it's not so much about admiring that person that has developed to that stage. Of course, there is some gratitude for that, but it's more that inspiration that I can go there too. If you can, I can. And that's the loveliness. So Vishuddha is about willpower, but willpower that is associated with right choices. that is following our dream. It's about our personal expression. It's about speaking the truth. And of course, if we are disconnected from that, then it is about addiction, then it is about lying, then it is about turning away from divine will. In the Christian tradition, the sacrament would be confession. You know, we go and give our confession. This is our opportunity to speak the truth, no matter how challenging it is, right? Nowadays, there is maybe not so much confession, but there's many coaches and counselors, people that you have this intimate relationship with, that where you can say anything, where you can completely speak the truth, even 12-step programs, right, that then help you come along. So all of this would be associated with Vishuddha. So of course, all imbalances associated with mouth, with TMJ, with throat issues, with thyroid issues, parathyroid issues, all of those are generally associated with this particular chakra. And it's interesting again because in the Hebrew tradition, there's two sephirots that are associated with this particular energy center. And they are Hesed, which means greatness. And it also means love. And Gevura, which means judgment. So this is that discernment of greatness and judging that greatness, making the right choices. Very, very interesting that in that particular tradition, they see actually two aspects to it, that they acknowledge both coins to that. Ajna, our third eye center, and which we could put under the umbrella of seek only the spirit. It's about literally channeling the spirit. You know, in some of the more esoteric scriptures, when they talk about Ajna center, they actually talk about 3 Ajna centers. Our 3 inner teachers that we have. And when in esoteric acupuncture, there are different patterns that we use to address all 3 aspects of that. Because, again, they have to do with understanding, with divine understanding, and with divine assistance. And it's also interesting because in the Chinese philosophical thing, which we're getting to in a little while, there is also an association with 3 sages, 3 different aspects, sages associated with the Ajna center. And the Ajna center, that is truly our connection to spirit. That is also our clear evaluation of ourself, of our beliefs, to integrate our experiences. You know, that's the point where we go, that's one of the most important points when we go and meditate. Why do we meditate? Anybody an answer for that?
Quiet the mind.
Excellent. Yes. Anybody has ever come up for meditation, and even though maybe not much was going on inside of there, they come up and suddenly there was clarity? Yes? Suddenly there was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I need to do, even though you didn't even think about it. Yeah? So sometimes when we bring our focus inward, when we seek that particular expression and that particular guidance, it is truly given. And it's also interesting because in this particular center, the Ajna center's rules all our organs of observation, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our brain, and our nervous system. So this is, as small as this is, in a way, just this little connection right through here, through the brain, it has an amazing reach because it reaches through all our organs of observation. And of course, when there is disturbances, there will be neurological disturbances, there will be learning disabilities, there can be visual, auditory challenges and disadvantages. In the Catholic tradition, this particular, or in the Christian tradition, this particular sacrament would be ordination. That is when you are becoming a priest, a teacher, somebody that is connected to spirit. But I want to just take it to that next step and invite all of us, because it isn't just a few people that can go there. We all have our connection to spirit. We all have that place where we can channel spirit. We all, in a way, are ordained if we step into that. Now, last but not least is Sahasrara. Sahasrara is all about living in the present moment, releasing the past, releasing all the dead. You know, Sahasrara is a very interesting point right here on top of the head. In Chinese medicine, there's a point here. It's called Bai Hui. And Bai Hui means the meeting of 100 channels. And this is the meeting point where all the meridians come up to that meeting point. And here we connect to what we call the 9 souls. So this is a very, very important place. And it reminds us that what is real is right here, this very moment. That all the places from the past is something that we get to integrate, but what is real is this very moment right now. This is the place where we get to trust life, where we get inspired, where we have faith, where we set our values, our ethics, where we have courage to move forward, courage to live by all our humanitarian ideals that we each might have. And physically, this particular energy center rules, interestingly enough, very similar to Muladhara, rules basically everything. The muscles, the bones, the skin. And also, of course, our connection to the soul. Now, the connection to the soul, that is something that most of us, you know, it's not like we necessarily have a chat with our soul every day. Some of you might. But if we do, it's that part to that sane part, that part in us that where we go, oh yeah, I know you're still there. Even though my body goes to sleep, I know you are here with me. Even though my body is lost in dreamland or whatever land, you are here with me. So this Sahasrara, that's our connection to the soul. That's the connection to the Buddhic body, to the biggest, largest energetic body around us. And I have just talked about all of these things because I wanted to offer you a little bit of a map when you examine your own body, when you look at your own body to see, well, is there a place in here where personally for myself I could look at and I could ask the right questions? You know, we all want answers. But the answers, I believe, truly can only be given if the question is the right one. And the questions, the right questions, they're very individual. You get to be the ones that come up with the right questions. And when we listen, then it's like there's this little voice in our heart that gives us this question, that gives us that little key. You might not always like it, but it is there. And when we understand that connection between the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual layers within the body, that gives us an incredible map for us to move through in our healing journey. So things like meditation, things like connecting with yourself in a very, very conscious way, even things like cleaning the aura is a wonderful daily practice to do to connect with ourselves in that way. I want to go back to that one thing that I was talking about in the very, very beginning. Again, that step from the third chakra to the fourth chakra, from Manipura to Anahata. Because that relationship and how it is also seen from the Chinese medicine perspective is something that we're going to look at a little bit more now. I've called this workshop Green Dragon Rises and Red Bird Flies. Well, in the old alchemical texts of Chinese medicine, the heart was associated with the red bird. Red, because the heart is associated, is full of blood, is full of passion. A bird, because the heart is that one organ system in the body that can connect to spirit. And the way that the heart was seen and that bird was seen, it had this ability to lift up and go up and gain perspective. You know, when you're a bird, you can see everything from a bird's eye view. You're not stuck somewhere. You can open your wings and at any moment change your perspective. You can go low, you can go high, you can make circles, but you have a different perspective. And in the old texts, that's what they were talking about, is that this is the highest aspect of our heart, is that ability to have perspective. That ability to have creative perspective and the ability to see our life and ourselves from a different viewpoint. The heart, energetically, holds what we call the Shen. The Shen is another word for spirit. Could be another word for soul. And if you are at all in touch with all the work that the Hearth Math Institute in Massachusetts is doing, they talk a lot about all the electromagnetics of the heart, that out of all the organ systems in the body, our heart actually has the biggest electromagnetic influence, right? So it is literally like this bird, like this energy that can lift up, that can spread its wings and open and widen. And in the Chinese system, the heart is supposed to be the emperor. Well, the heart is the emperor. The heart is what's supposed to rule. This particular kingdom, this, or whatever you want to call this, but this unit is ruled by this benevolent, beautiful emperor that anytime she chooses to glides up, looks out over the lands, gains perspective, learns, has creativity, and then comes back and rules benevolently the state of the rest of the body. So that calls for an open heart. That calls for incredible vulnerability also. That calls for patience, compassion. And this particular bird, visualization of that particular bird, I've always found incredibly beneficial in times of challenge. Because when I imagine, most of the time when we go through challenging times, the first thing that we do is we go, okay, I'm gonna figure this one out, right? We don't go, oh, yes, I'm really gonna open here. I'm going to lean into this discomfort here. Yes, let me lean a little more. No, we go, no, I'm going to fight this bugger, right? So, and the challenge is that to find a balance here. And when we talk about that red bird, I also want you to take a moment here for yourself and visualize your own individual red bird inside. You're welcome to close your eyes. We can all close our eyes. I won't look at you. And you can sit up. And you can imagine that right between the shoulder blades, that's the widest aspect of the back of that bird. And if it were to open its wings, it would go all the way out into the shoulder blades and even all the way into the arms. And you can just feel that just by your breath. And you can feel that the beak of that bird is like right around where Vishuddha is, that little hollow at the bottom of the throat. And that spot right in the center between your shoulder blades. Very interesting point in Chinese medicine. The name of that point is spirit path. Shen Dao, the Dao, the path of the Shen, of spirit. So it is through here where we literally receive the information of our spirit. Okay, we can open our eyes again. So this red bird, for some of us, that bird actually isn't red. For some of us, it's purple. Sometimes when I have children coming that work with me, I ask them to paint that red bird. And when they do, because they have a very different filtering system than we do, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be pretty, whatever they paint. They just paint whatever comes to them. And what they show me is so stunning as far as a description of what is going on inside of them, that sometimes I want to just jump up and down and tell their parents, see, this is what's going on. Because it is really unbelievably amazing how we are connected to some of these archetypes within us. And that bird, that feeling of freedom, that needing of freedom. It's interesting because in Chinese medicine, the heart is associated with one of the things. It's associated with sleep. It's associated with many different things. But sleep is one of the things that is associated with. And do you know that sometimes when you go through a lot of stress, sleep is a lot harder? Yes? Anybody's ever noticed that? And when you wake up and then you go, huh! Right? That bird is in a cage. That bird has no perspective, right? Doesn't. Yeah? And sometimes just working with some of these archetypes can really help us understand ourselves a little bit better. Sometimes for myself, because I go through these periods, right? I go through these periods of stress and not being, in sleep Menopause, sleep, oh my God. Phew, we could do a whole workshop on just that. Is one of those things where I personally have resorted to a lot of these particular archetypes to help me move through some of this. And it's been wonderful because it's been so simple and yet so profound, and the result has been so profound. So this heart, it holds our spirit, it holds the divine creativity. And the other creature that I was mentioning here was the green dragon. Now the green dragon is, again, another one of those mythical creatures that is associated with a particular organ system in the body. Now, when we hear dragon, we think about fairy tale, right? It's definitely, for most of us, it's a mythical creature, it's a mystical creature. And the dragon, what makes it so special is the fact that it can change forms. It can be subdued and quiet, and it can be wild and roaring, right? In the Chinese system, in the alchemical text, that green dragon is associated with our liver. Now, the liver is this organ of metabolism that is incredibly busy. It can do about 450 different chemical actions at any given moment. It is busy all the time. And that particular dragon, if we look at where the liver is, if we kind of place it inside the body, it would be kind of in our abdominal cavity, right? And when we think about the fairy tales, then that dragon, at its best, it was always protecting some sort of treasure, right? It was always holding some sort of treasure. Now, in the Chinese system, that particular treasure that it was holding are two things, actually. One is, in the yoga system, we would call it the precious pearl of consciousness. In the Western system, we might call it something like the adrenals, right? And which is the thing that we really want to preserve, that kind of strength as we get older. And the other thing is what that dragon, that treasure that dragon holds, is what we in Chinese medicine call blood. It's not just our physical blood. The Chinese expression of blood is like literally our life juice. All our juices, all our yumminess, all the things that makes us alive and vibrant. That is the blood. That is the juice. That is the thing that you see in a little baby, and it's just so incredibly irresistible because it's so plump and so yum and so and so round and so, yeah? That is blood. So this is what this dragon protects. And but the dragon, because it is a mystical creature, it has a great range. And in its range, it ranges all the way down into the feet. There's an interesting point right between the big toes. Liver 3, because it's associated with the liver. Great rushing. That's when the energy begins to rush out of the body, right? And it goes all the way, that meridian energy line goes all the way to the top of the head, which is what we had already talked about before, Bai Hui, the meeting of 100 points. That's where it connects to our soul. Now, the dragon is a very, very important part of our esoteric makeup, because the dragon is the first line of defense, right? Makes perfect sense, right? That we would have a dragon to go, no, right? And then we'd also have a dragon to go out and be our army. The liver is also associated with our inner general. That's the general, that's the army that goes plans, that pushes our boundaries, that creates new things, that grows, that expands. All of that is associated with liver. All of that is associated with the green dragon. So that particular relationship and here's where it gets very interesting, between the green dragon and that red bird becomes incredibly important. Because for most of us, it is that inner general that I have to, I should, I gotta, I'm gonna, ba-bum, da-dum, is holding that beautiful, free bird hostage. Yes, anybody can relate to that just a little bit? I know I can. And so for us to find that perfect balance, to find that place where we can let our spirit roam and fly and free, where we can connect to the strength, to that creativity of that green dragon, of our inner dragon that we have inside, and using it for our personal power, for our personal protection, without running on empty and emptying our blood and emptying our adrenals by too much fighting, by too much any kind of abuse, by too much work, by anything too much, really, right? Because the dragon can easily go too much. But to bring him back, to allow him to have his place as our protector and as the holder of our most precious pearl. So, and it's very interesting, again, I just want to, if you visualize, if you see your dragon, personally, I prefer to see myself protected by a dragon than by an army. I have a much nicer association with a green dragon than I have with an army. So I like that image that when I go out and I know I have some real challenges ahead, to see that dragon and go, okay, so what do you look like today? Are you green? Are you this vibrant green-blue with maybe some pink swirls in there? Or what do you look like today? And how are you going to assist me? I like to work with these images as I move forward in life. And you know what? When I forget, I notice it. So anyway, some of these points that I wanted to talk about. Center of the chest. Very interesting point. Right here. This particular point is called the central temple. This is literally the central temple of our spirit. And another, when we talk about the heart, around the heart, there is what we call the pericard. Energetically, it's also the heart protector. That's sort of like the CEO that says, no, to the president, well, I'm going to take care of all these things because this doesn't concern you, right? It's sort of like, and that particular pericard is very connected to that dragon. That is our boundary, our inner boundary. And it's very, very interesting because that inner boundary, it comes into the body. Where we first meet it is, I want you to do all that with me. I want you to take your hand right here underneath your shoulder blade as close as you come, and then I want you to just drop it down until your arms are about parallel. If you have your elbows out, your arms are around parallel. Right there. Is there a spot? If you rub around a little bit, is there a spot that's maybe tender? Yes? Yes? Pericard 1. It's called the celestial pool. So this is where the pool, the energies of the spirit, of the divine, of the heavens, this is where they come together. This is where they pool together. And you know what's actually really, really interesting? Because there's a whole bunch of lymph nodes underneath there. And a lot of the times when breast cancer starts, this is where it tends to start. Strange, isn't it? Strange coincidence. And so when we look at some of these ancient medicines, I find it so incredibly fascinating how they overlap. Does it mean that when you're sore you're going to have breast cancer? No, please, you don't. But it's just an interesting place for us to look at how the human body fits into the bigger picture. So another point that I want to mention here, which is also very interesting. Remember when we talked about the dragon, and I said he's like right in that cave, that's where he kind of mostly hangs out. Right here at the very top of the rib cage, right here where it comes together. Right here at the when we talked about Manipura and Anahata, and we talked about third and fourth chakra, and we talked about the diaphragm, right here at the very top. Yeah, this particular point is called the spirit storehouse, Shen Fu. So this is literally where our spirit hangs out. I like to rub that point on me sometime. It's not very comfortable. Not very comfortable. But it's amazing when you let go how much freer you breathe and what is stored in there. Because when that spirit is stored away in there, sometimes we need to let it go a little bit. Yeah? Also interesting talking about the spirit and the red bird holding the spirit. All these points up here in the Chinese esoteric system, I mean, all these points here have names of spirit. Spirit garage, spirit house, spirit veranda, all these different kinds of spirit names, right? And it is said that we hold our old memories and the memories of our ancestors in some of these points. Very, very interesting. So much of our heartache literally is stored in the heart. And now I want you to just stand up with me one more time. One more time. I want you to explore one point with me that I've always found very interesting. So I want you to bring your hands kind of underneath that floating rib there. And then I want you to bring your thumb perfectly behind it. Perfectly behind it. And you'll also find maybe just the edge of a rib. Yes? Yes? And do you know in how many things they have this and that and blum da dum da dum da dum? Yeah? Yeah? Isn't it interesting? Well, this particular point in front is called Gate of Perfection. Da 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 da. And the one in the back is called Residence of Will. Isn't that super interesting? Anybody else find that interesting or not? Okay, good. You can sit down. But it is also here where energetically these two animals literally come together. Do you notice? I mean, just for me, just to hold this here, something happened here. Something opened. Yes? Okay. So, and this is actually it for today, except for one last thing that I would like to read. One poem that has always touched me very much. It's not as fun as the first one, but is just as touching. And it is by D.H. Lawrence. I'm not a mechanism, an assembly of various sections. And it is not because the mechanism is working wrongly that I am ill. I am ill because of the wounds to the soul, to the deep emotional self. And the wounds to the soul take a long, long time. Only time can help. And patience. And a certain difficult repentance. Long, difficult repentance. Realization of life's mistake. And the freeing oneself from the endless repetition of the mistake, which mankind has largely chosen to sanctify. Thank you very much.